warm welcome to the launch event of Fairwork on the transformation of the warehouse sector through AI. My name is Funda Ustek Spilda. I'm here joined by Lola Brittain and Callum Cant. We are researchers at Fairwork and authors of the report, and will be presenting today the findings of our study. I would like to also mention the names of the other authors of the report who have made significant contributions to the research: Matthew Cole, Oz Alianak, Roberto Mazzocchiadi, and Mark Graham. Some housekeeping rules to start with. Today we have 45 minutes. In the first 25 minutes, we will present the Fairwork report and our findings, and we will then have 20 minutes for questions and answers. Please add your questions to the chat throughout the session, and our communication manager, Zoe Johnson, will collate them and we will answer them after our presentation. The report is now available to download on our website at fair.work, as well as the GPAI website. I would like to start with a round of thanks. We would like to acknowledge the tireless efforts of colleagues at the Paris Expert Support Center at INRIA and GPAI, Future of Work Working Group. We are grateful in particular for the support of Edward Havis, project leader at INRIA, Alex Shi, Future of Work Working Group co-chair, and Lucia Velasco, Future of Work Working Group co-chair. We would also like to acknowledge the vital support of Janine Burke from the International Labour Organization as a project co-lead, and Matthias Peisner from Future of Work Working Group, previous chair from the Fraunhofer Institute. In addition, we would like to thank members of Amazon UK management team for facilitating site visits, sharing information, and providing a comment on this report. Special thanks are also extended to organizers at the GMB who provided important background information to us, the researchers. We also extend our gratitude to all the workers who have shared their time, expertise, and experience with us during the research process. I would like to start by giving an overview of the research project. Is it working? Okay. The Fairwork project has, since 2021, focused on the present risks posed by AI system deployment on working conditions. Our last report, published in December 2023, focused on a case study of Sama, a data annotation company located within the global production networks of AI. In that report, we had highlighted that the data workers who facilitate advanced AI development can face unfair working conditions that require significant and widespread change if they are to be improved. This current report addresses a second aspect of human labor in AI supply chains: how AI systems are transforming the workplaces where they are deployed. To do so, we focus on Amazon, specifically its operations in the UK. Amazon is a global giant that integrates data labelers, warehouse workers, delivery drivers, and software and hardware developers into one of the most complex logistic operations in human history. This network is shaped by AI on multiple levels, from the generation of forecasts and fulfillment plans to the actual process of work on the warehouse floor, as well as management of the routes, schedules, and allocation of parcels for the last mile delivery. Unlike other Fairwork reports, which provide a fairness score as part of the analysis, this report is exploratory in nature, aiming to shed light on how the complex operational infrastructure of Amazon is integrating AI into the workplace and how it is impacting the working conditions of those who are managed by it. Still, the sections below and what we will be talking about and presenting in this event highlight the concerns workers have raised regarding the working conditions, as well as the practical steps Amazon is currently taking to address some of them. There is more in-depth information about the specific technologies we research in the report. However, it is important to acknowledge that within the warehouse, AI deployment is multifaceted. Associates, as Amazon refers to them, work alongside AI-enabled robots under the guise of computer vision enhanced cameras and at the behest algorithmically deciphered rates. Combination of technologies together with other forms of software, such as Adapt System, which we will talk about later, and hardware such as scanners, screens, and pick-by-light systems, as well as the associates situated at critical junctures within the warehouse, enables the rapid delivery of products ordered from Amazon Co. UK. Speed is so important to Amazon because it is via the acceleration of inventory through the supply chain that it can maintain its promise to consumers of fast and efficient delivery. Critically, the company sought to automate key tasks within the fulfillment process. This process of automation has been conducted primarily within two distinct but connected technological fields, robotics and artificial intelligence. In 2009, Amazon began using a machine learning algorithm which enabled the implementation of a single forecasting system to make forecasts for different product lines, even when they may have different features. This enabled to forecast changes in product demand and marked one of the early stages in a process development that has led to the creation of Scott. Amazon describes Scott as a master conductor leading an orchestra of millions. The system facilitates the management of the vastly complex Amazon supply chain by forecasting demand, placing orders, managing supply chain capacity, planning fulfillment, and identifying the optimal route for delivery. Taken as a whole, Scott is probably one of the most consequential AI systems in the world, performing automatic management functions that direct substantial parts of Amazon's $1.8 trillion of capital on a daily basis. The use of robotics in the fulfillment process began at a similar time, with the acquisition of Kiva Systems, subsequently renamed Amazon Robotics in 2012. Aspiring towards a revolutionization of inventory distribution within the warehouses, Kiva developed robotic drive units to read barcodes on warehouse floors and deliver inventory to stationary workers, thereby increasing the speed of picking and packing. Fast forward to 2024, and Amazon has built substantially on Kiva's original vision, claiming to have deployed more than 750,000 robots in its fulfillment operations worldwide. It has developed an array of robotic solutions to automate key labor processes. This includes further iterations of the original robotic drive unit, as well as the fully autonomous mobile robot, which can move 800-pound carts around a fulfillment center without being confined or restricted to a particular area, and the Nike Intent Detection System, IDS, which uses deep learning-based computer vision cameras to confirm the location of products in pods by associates. Against this background, in this project, we followed the overall Fairwork methodology and brought together 3 approaches to effectively measure and understand the fairness of working conditions in the warehouses of Amazon UK. In this report, we drove on research undertaken in the UK between December 2022 and April 2024, with the majority of field work and site visits taking place between April 2023 and April 2024. The analysis we will present together brings together insights from the data that we have compiled based on research, desk research, worker interviews, analysis of company policies, terms and conditions, contracts where accessible, conversations and engagements with managers from Amazon, site visits to Amazon warehouses in Manchester, and one delivery station, and discussions and observations on the picket lines staged by striking Amazon workers, including with union organizers. Due to the risk of identification, we do not detail which picket lines we have observed, and we use a variety of techniques to present our findings. In total, we have conducted 22 interviews from different types of facilities within the network of that underpins Amazon.co.uk, including a receive center, robotic, manual, and specialty fulfillment centers, and a delivery center. Some of the interviewed workers had worked at several facilities across the distribution network as a result of the internal transfer scheme offered by Amazon, whereby workers may be paid to move to a different facility. The interview sample consisted primarily of current associates. When we were doing our analysis, we followed the Fairwork AI principles as the main framework. As you might know, Fairwork AI have been developed around 5 principles of Fairwork overall principles around pay, conditions, contracts, management, and representation. You can find the full thresholds and explanation of the principles on our website. Now we will go into the analysis, and I will give the floor to my colleague Lola.
Okay, thanks, Funda. So yeah, I'm now going to talk through findings in line with the principles that Funda's just outlined. So I'm going to start with fair pay, then I'm going to cover fair conditions and fair contracts before handing over to Callum, who's going to cover fair management and fair representation. So first, I'll talk about pay. As Funda explained, the interviews conducted for this research took place between April 2023 and May 2024. At the time, inflation in the UK was spiralling, and several workers, especially those with families, recalled struggling as basic costs increased significantly. Nighttime shifts and overtime are kind of both paid a premium at Amazon, and several full-time associates recalled working to like 50 or 60 hours a week. Overtime is capped at 60 hours per week, at points, sometimes weeks on end, simply to make ends meet. Now, during the time that we conducted the research, pay at Amazon UK did change several times. So as you can see from the table displayed in the slides, there were 3 raises to the basic minimum starting salary. And the most recent increase brings the starting minimum pay to at least 30p above the real living wage in the UK, which is £12 an hour currently. However, pay at Amazon, the starting minimum pay, continued to be at least 15% lower than the London living wage, which is currently £13.15. Now, as the third image on the slide shows, which, the one titled Your Benefits, Amazon UK also announced a package of financial benefits for all full-time, part-time and temporary associates. So this includes things like the Career Choice Programme, and this is where workers are provided financial aid to access courses. However, the key concern for workers interviewed was the rate of pay, and those that were interviewed close to the kind of most recent increase did emphasize the inadequacy of this rate, with the sentiment that this really doesn't reflect the effort and kind of strain that the job requires, especially in some of the more intense on-task roles. Now, we're going to use the terms on-task and off-task a few times throughout this presentation. So for context, off-task is kind of where workers are providing kind of supporting functions. They're not directly handling inventory, and they're not working with scanners. And scanners are devices that read barcodes. On-task roles are tasks where workers are directly handling inventory and they are using those scanners. Are subject to kind of monitoring by those scanners, as Callum will talk about, and also to kind of performance targets. But basically, I think the point I want to make here is that this sentiment which emerged that the pay doesn't necessarily reflect the effort and strain the job requires, this speaks to a broader issue which is not specific to Amazon, but which we should consider when we're thinking more broadly about automation in the context of the workplace. And that is that kind of the productivity gains associated with automation are not being redistributed to all stakeholders. And I think this is reflected. Oh, sorry, Funda, just to be clear. I think this kind of broader point around pay and broader kind of worker issues with it are reflected in the GMB union's ongoing campaign for £15 an hour, as you can see on the slide. Okay, so moving on to conditions. Now, the first thing I want to start with is that the introduction of robotics does appear to have made certain tasks easier. For example, the mobile drive units, which Funda discussed in the introduction, now bring pods, which are shelves, to workers within stations such as picking and stowing. They're on-task stations. And this means that workers don't need to walk extensive distances, which was something that we heard as a kind of significant challenge from those who are still working at manual facilities. Workers describe walking up to 15 kilometers a day and often much more. In addition to this, we did identify some positive interventions to address some task-specific risks associated with warehouse work. These are primarily focused on ergonomics. So you can see one example on the slide here, and this is Mind and Body Moments. This was introduced as part of the Working Well program, and it's essentially where workers are prompted to take 30-second breaks each hour, and they're provided with kind of on-screen stretches. Another example is like training for how to safely lift boxes. However, there are really significant challenges that remain, and some of those have been exacerbated by the introduction of robotics. So what I'm specifically referring to here is pace. So workers in on-task roles performance targets. These are referred to colloquially as the rate. Now, the workers interviewed for this research had not been informed about how the rate was calculated. Some referred to it simply as the algorithm. What they were aware of was the need to achieve an acceptable rate relative to other associates, to remain, as some put it, out of the bottom 5%. And there was, from those who had transferred between kind of manual and robotic sites, there was a sense that now that robots are part of this process, it's harder to hit an acceptable rate. Now, workers described that the failure to work at an acceptable rate could lead to managerial questioning, coaching, which, to get them to perform the tasks, like learning how to perform the tasks, but also to potential disciplinary actions such as a negative adapt. Now, according to the limited public information available and data collected for this report, ADAPT is a software used by management to track employee performance and provide positive and negative validation across a range of dimensions. This includes kind of productivity and quality, but also safety and general behavior. Now, in addition to pace, workers also are performing repetitive motions, doing the same task over and over again. Certain roles also require significant physical exertion, such as kind of pulling and lifting heavy carts and boxes, which is kind of more the case in off-task roles. And of course, at the same time, workers are standing, for 10 hours a day, apart from 2 30-minute breaks, one which is paid, one which is unpaid. And, when workers take their breaks, they do have to travel across these large warehouses from their workstation to the break station as well. So what's the result of all of this? Well, there's persistent exhaustion as well as aches and pains. Some workers, explain that simple tasks such as driving or cycling home feel, almost impossible after the shift. Now, in certain warehouses, management do appear to be rotating workers between tasks to kind of mitigate some of these impacts, but requests to rotate are not necessarily accepted. And indeed, we were told that, requests for rotation had been denied unless workers improved their rate. This was in like a specific example. In addition to the physical challenges, there are also significant mental health challenges. Partly this is due to the stress of, targets and monitoring, which Callum will address further, but also isolation. Now, workers at robotic sites described fixed pick workstations as a sort of cage. And finally, the last point I want to mention with regards to conditions is the sickness policy. So workers reported that they're limited to 3 incidents of sickness in a 6-month period, with the failure to adhere to this resulting in like a warning, which renders them unable to be promoted for 6 months and to transfer between different warehouses for 3. So there was kind of a sentiment that you can't really be sick. Now I'm going to move on to contracts. So Amazon offers a variety of contracts to associate, including full-time, part-time, and term-time contracts. Now, all of those interviewed for this research were on permanent contracts, but many did begin as fixed-term contracts as seasonal associates, as Amazon calls them. This is workers that are hired to kind of account for fluctuations in demand during like peak times, so over the Christmas period, for example. And also, some were outsourced by agencies. I'm going to focus on the seasonal associates for this section. So, as I said, seasonal associates are hired for months on end to account for fluctuations in demand, and the number of seasonal associates per region is informed by SCOT, the supply chain optimization technologies that Funda discussed earlier. Now, there is a chance of getting kept on as a seasonal associate, but this isn't guaranteed. So workers had been in this position recalled that like getting kept on was dependent on their rate, their attendance, and their general behavior. And this dynamic doesn't just affect those in kind of the more precarious contractual arrangement. It also seems to generate an overall increase in the pace of work on the warehouse floor. And that is because rates are determined, at least in part, but not fully, on kind of the average rate of processing at each site over the past 4-week period. Now, more broadly, I think with regards to robotics, obviously, which we've been mentioning in this report, workers did articulate fears about kind of automation-driven job losses in the future. And, there was a speculation that in a number of years, Amazon will only need a very small number of engineers. Obviously, we didn't test this. This is just kind of a sentiment that's emerging from workers. And I think the final point I want to make here is that we do need to be mindful that the operations underpinning the delivery of products that are ordered on amazon.co.uk do also rely on kind of an assortment of other outsourced workers. So this includes the warehouse cleaners, who are kind of maybe contracted by agencies, also data workers, who are contracted by Amazon Flex, and also the delivery service partner program. Now, the working conditions of those workers are not considered in depth in this report at all, but I think, it's just a relevant point to make when we're talking about kind of the whole supply chain. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Callum to talk about fair management.
Okay, thank you so much, Lola. So Amazon operates a system of what we call algorithmic management. So by that we mean lots of decisions that would have historically been taken by a human being are now being taken by automated decision-making systems. And this kind of organizes the working life of associates on the warehouse floor. So this system operates via a number of different technologies, including scanners, screens, visual instruction systems that use colored lights to guide people's hands. All of these kind of compound on top of one another. So this system of management means that workers in some departments, so particularly those in pick, the people in what Lola earlier described as cages, doing that work, spend the majority of their day reacting to standardized prompts multiple times a minute. They have little or no latitude for variation in their roles, and they repeat the same motions and actions over and over all day. Interviews we talk to describe this sometimes as leading to them working without thinking, right? There's a certain kind of robotic interaction required as a result of the demands of this system of algorithmic management. So the intensity of their work is monitored using this system, with two key metrics in particular being important. The first of which is the rate. So this is the colloquial term for productivity, how many actions are completed in a given time frame, how many items of inventory are interacted with, say within the minute or hour. And secondly, idle time, meaning how much time per day is not accounted for as productive work for reasons like toilet breaks, etc. So Amazon give their own definition of idle time as a period of inactivity on a direct task. And I've also confirmed that in the event of an issue with individual performance, the employee's total working time and therefore their time off task may be reviewed to examine what's affecting productivity. So every second of the working day is monitored, and this leads to a pervasive impression of workplace surveillance. Sometimes this surveillance is very literal. Think about the Nike computer system we talked about earlier that watches a workstation and observes workers' hands where they're placing items, where they're retrieving items. So in general, this gives us a kind of textbook example of a high-strain, low-latitude work process, which is likely to have a number of consequent implications for workers in terms of exhaustion, mental health, and so on that we've discussed already. Managers use these metrics, particularly the rate and idle time, to set a high baseline of productivity and keep workers engaged all the time. This is where the ADAPT program comes in again, because if you fail to meet those targets consistently, negative ADAPTs are the consequence. Now, a negative ADAPT in and of itself doesn't mean a termination of employment. Instead, these add up and lead to formal warnings and creates a kind of negative incentive structure. There is also a positive incentive structure around points called swaggies that are awarded to people who work well in the warehouse, and there are kind of benefits to meeting targets consistently as well. So it's possible to move off task to roles that are less intensively monitored around the rate, where that surveillance and performance management regime is kind of less stringently applied. But there was a widespread impression amongst our interviewees that access to these roles is controlled by an informal system of management favoritism, and that it wasn't universally possible to move into those as and when you wanted. So to move on to fair representation, so Funda, if you can drop the thing over. Freedom of association is a universally recognized fundamental right. So there are many sources we can draw it from. It's enshrined in the ILO Constitution, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and so on and so forth. So part of the positive aspect of this right is that workers should not only be allowed to organize without sanction, they shouldn't be prevented from forming independent trade unions, for instance, but also their voice should be actively listened to and considered. To be fairly represented, workers at Amazon would need to be able to organize independently and have the voice of their independent organizations accounted for by management in important decision-making. Unfortunately, this goal currently seems a very long way away. Amazon does have structures that it claims express collective worker voice, such as elected associate forums and voice of associate boards. These are within the workplace kind of electronic boards that display comments and questions from associates around the place. neither of those are meaningfully independent, right? So there are currently, there is an attempt to organise with the GMB trade union in the Midlands. At the moment, Amazon has a long history of opposing trade unions, both in the UK and internationally, and has resisted collective bargaining as a norm of business. That means this campaign has been somewhat antagonistic. At the moment, hundreds, if not thousands, of Amazon workers in the Midlands have joined the GMB union, are campaigning for a pay rise and union recognition. Amazon's resisting the creation of a recognition agreement with the union, and the GMB alleges the use of a range of anti-union tactics, including captive meetings and the bullying of union representatives amongst the workforce. So now I'll hand it over to Funda to conclude.
I would like to thank you so much, Callum and Lola. I would just like to conclude with just a few remarks about the overall findings of the report. Within the warehouse, what our report finds is that AI deployment is very multifaceted. Associates, as Amazon refers to them, work alongside AI-enabled robots under the guise of computer vision-enhanced cameras at the behest of algorithmically deciphered rates, as we have described. So the key finding of the report is that AI deployment in the workplace goes beyond the specific technologies that are being introduced to replace manual tasks or make them more efficient. Rather, a lot more is at stake. A significant transformation of industry relations is happening, and this impacts all stakeholders in the supply chain: workers, consumers, companies, regulators, and policymakers. It's thus key to explore how the technology is changing the overall operational structure. Such a perspective involves asking at each step essential questions about power, agency, interest, accountability, and ability to reverse or remove the technology from the system. Otherwise, we risk building an extremely opaque system with harmful outcomes for workers. In closing, we would like to remind the participants today, as well as the readers of our report, that the findings of this report are not exclusive to workers within Amazon UK's warehouses, but are instead reflective of the experience of workers in the broader AI supply chain. We will continue our research in 2024 with further analysis of data workers in the AI supply chain, and we hope that we can stay in touch, and please check our website regularly for any updates and upcoming reports. Thank you so much. Now we will continue to questions.
Do we have any questions?
I don't think so. You can see the comments tab on the back end. We've got Edward. Does Amazon use freelancers like home delivery companies or private chauffeur apps? We should talk about Flex here. Lola, do you want to start introducing Flex? You mentioned it in the main body of the presentation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so yeah, as I said, we didn't focus on this in this presentation, this kind of report, because the report was focused more on the conditions of warehouse workers. But we did visit a delivery station, and that is where workers who are contracted via kind of we identified two main arrangements. So that's Amazon Flex and the Delivery Service Partners Program. And yeah, neither of those workers are employed. So they are kind of Amazon Flex, it's self-employed independent contractors. So Fairwork has actually rated Amazon Flex previously in our kind of location-based platform research in the UK. And the Delivery Service Partners Program is something that's relatively new at Amazon, according to our research. And this is basically where people who may own already or want to manage a fleet of vans can kind of sign up to this program, and through that they contract other workers. But so, you know, when you see those Amazon vans driving around that say Prime on, they are part of this Delivery Service Partners Program. And, you know, there's been research around kind of monitoring and surveillance in those vans also, and the way that like workers kind of who are in that arrangement, despite not being employed, are also kind of subject to performance management. But yeah, as I said, this isn't something that we've investigated in this report deeply. So that's just kind of a top line finding.
Cool. Thanks, Lola. I guess I will do the kind of chairing of the questions. We've got two more now. First, have you observed any gender differences? So how does gender play out in the warehouse, and how does AI management affect that? And then from Boris, to what extent do the negative results of this finding, could they be attributed to management culture versus AI deployment? For example, could the supply chain organizing technology be used for more empowered operations management in a different context? Do you guys want to take the gender one and I'll take the second one?
Yeah, I can take the gender one. We didn't observe any gender differences at the moment, really, though this wasn't necessarily kind of a focus, but no, nothing emerged significantly in relation to that. But I think, that points to kind of an area where further research is definitely necessary. And, research has been done a lot in the US, which has highlighted kind of not necessarily specific to AI, but with regards to kind of the way race and kind of other identity categories with regards to ethnicity play out in the warehouse. So I'd encourage anyone interested in that to kind of take a look at some of that research also.
Great. And in response to Boris's question, to what extent should we say that this is kind of these negative results are technologically determined, and to what degree are they somewhat more flexible? I think we have to take a quite a flexible approach to answering this question, insofar as AI, I think within itself does not necessarily carry a particular set of relations between managers and workers. Instead, there's a much more flexible relationship that can be embodied in lots of different ways. So I think absolutely, when we're thinking about how technologies like the supply chain organizing technology could be deployed, there is kind of a version where productivity gains result in more kind of shared stakeholder benefits, where we can see improvements around, for instance, the utilization of scarce resources. There's a number of potential avenues for this. The challenge will be that the use of technology is somewhat over-determined in our current social context by who's designing the technology, who's implementing the technology, and who controls that process. So I think for those more emancipatory alternatives to emerge, we need to think very strongly about possibilities for co-determination, other approaches in terms of bringing all stakeholders into the process, and thinking about how the people who use the technology on a day-to-day basis, who have their lives organized by it, as Amazon warehouse workers do, can be brought into that. And so that, for me, is why fair representation is so important, and this emphasis on collective bargaining and co-determination really has to be uppermost. And this has been a consistent theme of our work with the GPAI over probably the last 2 years, is that we think there's a very clear way to see beneficial outcomes here, and it's through the engagement of those social processes. So we also have another question about from Gwendolyn: how do struggles of UK Amazon workers intersect with those based in other jurisdictions like the US? What is unique about the UK context? Do you want to take that, Funda?
Sure. Thank you for this question, Gwendolyn. So when we were doing the background research for this study, we found a lot of studies on Amazon workers in the US, but there's very little research on Amazon workers elsewhere, even though Amazon is a global company. So one of the intentions behind doing this research was really to understand what are the commonalities, but also differences. This is why we call our study exploratory in nature. It is not to exceptionalize the UK case in any way, but to understand what are the specific contractual terms, what are the specific regulatory environment impact on how the workers are experiencing the introduction of AI deployment in the workplace. There's also a level of understanding in terms of the technologies that are being recently introduced to the UK that have been perhaps already in use in the US for some time. So for us, this enabled us to understand a bit more in depth about how the workers are reflecting on the new introductions of the technologies. So just to repeat again, perhaps that our intention is not to exceptionalize the UK case or say that it is different or not having anything sort of, commonalities with the US workers, but to provide a new insight, a new case study to understand deployment of AI in the workplace.
And if I could just add to that, I think with regards to Funda's point about technology, there are some kind of things that are being raised. So for example, there's wristband wristband style trackers in the US, and they don't appear to be used in the UK according to our research. And Amazon's actually said that as well in some evidence they submitted to the Business Energy Industrial Strategy. So you can see that there are kind of different ways in which the management is taking place, and also different developments in technology. And some with regards to robotics, things don't seem to be kind of integrated like at once. They might be trialed out at one place and then kind of like rolled out slowly. So I think that's quite an important thing to note, that like we still have, for example, in the UK, some manual sites without the mobile robotic drive units and stuff like that. So again, it's not only that there are differences at like at the national level, there are also kind of differences within different countries with regards to kind of what technologies are used and whatnot. And obviously that has an impact on working conditions and how workers experience on the warehouse floor.
Yeah, I think it would make our lives a lot easier if there was one universal Amazon work processor and we didn't need to think about the the sub variations. But obviously, regulatory environments will also be shaping that, the particular way that legislation interacts. All of those will be coming together. So I think that's it for us. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and answer your questions. The report is up online now. I think Zoe's put it in the comments, so you can take a look there. We really appreciate you all coming along, and I hope that this has been useful. Obviously, myself and others are very happy to chat to people if you're doing research in the area or you're working on AI or anything similar. Please do get in touch. I think you should be able to find us all on LinkedIn or preferably email. Either way works.
Oh, Callum, we actually have one additional question.
Okay.
So Edward says, and what about the consumer? Is the issue of working conditions in a company with such a strong presence a recurring theme in the UK? So who wants to take this one? I mean, the consumer, the background of the report, I guess we talk about like why these technologies are being introduced, and that's because of faster delivery. So kind of, getting Amazon is, as it kind of often says, a consumer obsessed company, and it's all about delivering products that have been ordered on amazon.co.uk. So I think like obviously they're connected, because that everything that's happening in the warehouse is orientated towards this goal of kind of securing faster and faster delivery times. So I think obviously an issue of working conditions is connected to that, because how work is changing is shaped by consumer facing objectives. I don't know if you two have anything to add to that point.
No, obviously, without the consumer demand, it would be very it would be very difficult to understand the size of the operations and the new technologies that are being introduced. It is to speed up the process and create further efficiencies. So, of course, these are very, very linked.
Yeah, and also I think we also cite a video in the documentary, which is kind of it's called Shipping Wars, and it was produced by the Wall Street Journal. And this looks at kind of how the race for faster delivery is shaping, changes at not only Amazon, but also kind of some of its competitors in the US, so Target and Walmart. So I think this demonstrates that kind of like, because Amazon is the market leader with regards to delivery times. So I think this demonstrates how like dynamics are playing out, not only within Amazon itself, but across the kind of broader logistics industry. And obviously being a market leader, what Amazon does will also kind of have an impact on what competitors do as well. So there is that broader point to be made also.
All right. On that note, thank you, everyone. Edward, I suggest we close the session now, and we thank everyone for joining us today. And if anyone has further questions, as Callum said, please do feel free to email us or connect with us. We look forward to hearing your comments and thoughts on the report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.